Hey, Bomb Squad, Dan here. Have you been thinking about starting a podcast, but you don't know where to begin? Are you completely clueless? Are you completely lost? If so, you're in luck because I have the solution for you. It's Anchor by Spotify, the easiest way to make a podcast with everything you need all in one place. Anchor has the tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. When hosting on Anchor, you can distribute your podcast on listening platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. And best of all, Anchor is totally free. We use it, and you should too. So download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm and start your podcast today. Heckled by my mom. That's what's coming up on the Art of Bombing, episode 261.
My friend Dan, he's got a podcast, 'cause all comics need a podcast, and nobody had a podcast called The Art of Bombing. So Dan went out and bought a tape deck. Who knows why he bought a tape deck? Now podcasts don't get played on tape decks, but Dan is from the 80s. So hey there, all you funny jerks, come talk to Dan about your work. Tell him all about your worst times. It's The Art of Bombing.
Welcome to an all-new episode of the Art of Bombing podcast. It is me, the host, Dan Bublitz Jr., because this is my podcast. That is why I'm hosting it. That's how these things work. And with me, as always, is my co-producer, co-host, and cohort, Mr. Josh Shirley. How are you doing, Josh?
Good, I think. You went over the top on This Is My Podcast this time.
I did.
Like,
I really
it was.
I did.
Look, I'm a little not welcome here. Look, this is my
Last episode, you were like, "Oh wait, you didn't think I was coming back." This episode, I'm like, "My podcast."
Dude, you went. Yeah, all right, Dan. You host the podcast. It's yours. It's all yours.
You
no
got
one's
that?
challenging.
Okay, well, I just sometimes you have to exert your dominance.
And you have, sir.
I got to make sure there's no hostile takeovers.
You are wearing the pants.
That's right. That's why going forward, this podcast is now a Dan Bublitz comedy production versus Blitzed Entertainment production.
That's right, folks. Just so you know, if you become a subscriber, you'll find out sooner when I'm going to be fired from the show than I do. That's one of the perks.
Yeah.
Another
$2.99 a month.
And in case you missed that exchange of information, Dan is now going to not be sending me checks from a different place.
Exactly. Still not getting paid, but now you're not getting paid from Dan Bublitz Comedy LLC.
That's right. Which is a different place than Blitzed Entertainment, where your checks were not coming from before.
Exactly. And it's funny because the people listening, you're probably like, what are they even talking about? And that's fine. That's for me and Josh, and maybe a few people who get it. If you're listening, if you listen to all the episodes, you understand.
That's right. It's kind of a running gag.
It's a running gag.
But hey, I'm glad to be here.
I am too.
What's coming up? What's going on?
I know you had a pretty epic week because you were on vacation last week. You got to go to Disneyland with the family. That looked like a lot of fun.
Let's get something straight. Disney World.
Oh, I'm sorry. My bad.
Disneyland.
My bad.
I think you can fit all of Disneyland onto like one of the parks at Disney World or something. There's some crazy stat where like Disney World is flexing. It's
okay.
East Coast.
Kind of like I was flexing about hosting this podcast.
That's right. Let's get something straight.
Let's get something straight.
It was fun. And I went with my dad and my brothers and sisters. And my dad, so I was like, hey, I know you go to Disney. It's kind of your place. Like he knows about it. He's showing us around. I'm like, how many times would you say you've been here? He's like, 80.
Oh, wow.
I haven't been anywhere 80 times. So like, I mean, good Lord, what are you doing? Like, I love my dad. He's amazing. But I mean, as great as Disney World is, wouldn't you get tired of going to the same place that many times?
Oh, absolutely. But then I also go to the same like dive bar on a regular basis. And just in the year that I've lived here, I've probably been to that dive bar more than your dad's been to Disney World.
On average, how much money do you pay that dive bar?
I should own that dive bar. That's, or I should have some hefty. I should be a shareholder. That dive bar needs to be publicly traded so I can buy some stock.
But so a place like Disney World, it was amazing. My son had an absolute blast. He's 10 years old. We went to the Galaxy's Edge kind of Star Wars, part of the park, and it's an unforgettable experience. But I gotta tell you. Like, I don't know what I would do on my 81st trip to anywhere. I mean, dive bar, sure, but you're there to socialize with your friends.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think, for your dad, he got to show you guys what he loves about it. So
this was a huge trip for my dad. He absolutely loved having everybody there. And part of it was, you're right, so he could show us, he's like, hey, you see those boxes over there? I'm like, oh, now I do. Well, those boxes were actually part of the set on Wizard of Oz. Most people don't know that. It's like, this is something the other tour guides won't tell you, like. Oh,
that's amazing. That's like you're getting your own special tour of it. So that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Yeah. Did you do any shows while you're out there or in the last, weekend or anything?
Oh, comedy shows.
Well, yeah. Because you are still a comedian, right?
I thought about not being a comedian the last time I came off stage. I gotta tell you.
Oh, no. This sounds like a story.
Yeah. And for you guys listening, like, this is not a story that I told Dan and then we're going to redo on the show for you. He has not heard.
No, I have not heard this. I'm excited to hear this because for those of you, because this is an audio podcast, you can't see Josh's face. He looks very disappointed in what he's about to tell me.
Well, I actually wouldn't say it's disappointment. It's just kind of or
maybe defeat would have been a better word for that.
Yeah. Well, honestly, if you take the story I'm about to tell you out of the night, I would actually say that my set was fine. I mean, here's what I'm up against, right? It's a dive bar and it's in, the middle of Independence, which is kind of this blue collar-ish area that's just on the edge of town. Cops and firefighters type of place, which is cool, but that's not, I'm not playing to my strength. Second thing, there's a surprise party that is just concluded for somebody. So comics' worst nightmare. Everybody in the whole bar knows each other. And now there's a comedy show that they didn't know about. So that's what started. So I'm third comic up. First comic's the host. She's a little inexperienced and she doesn't do any crowd work, just goes straight into material. They're talking over her. Nobody catches a word. Second guy does kind of the same thing. So I have to kind of burn, 5 minutes just trying to pull the room together. And I feel like I did that. I told some jokes. They laughed and I got off stage. That's what I thought had happened. I find out that most of the bar is cop, and I close with a joke about cops. And I wish that was it. I wish that the laughs were muted on my closer because it offended a few police officers. Not that I wish to offend police officers, but I just wish that was the extent of what happened. Right. So, during my closing bit, I'm looking into the audience and there's this woman and she's got a glass bottle. She's sticking it in her mouth. She's pulling it out of her mouth. It's going around her mouth and it's going back in her mouth and she's looking at me. And that's what I can see. And I'm on stage. You've been there, Dan. Lights are in your eyes. You can just, that's it. So it's distracting me. And I'm saying, okay, I'm gonna let this go on. I'm just gonna try and finish out. But if she keeps doing it, I'm a comic. I'm trained to respond to what the audience is giving me. Hopefully a laugh, right? So I say to her, I look back, she's still doing it. It's distracting me. It's really making me lose my composure. I say, are you sticking that bottle in your mouth like the entire thing? Because it's really distracting me up here. She stops and I continue with my set. Everything's fine now, right? So I've dealt with the problem. It's just part of my duty. It's part of my job. I gotta react to what's going on. There people around could see it happening, and I had to call it out. I did. Done. Walked off stage. About 10 minutes later, a gentleman approaches me. He's about 10 years older than me. He's a lot bigger than me as well. And he says to me, during your set, you told a woman that she was sticking a bottle in her mouth? I said, yeah. He said, that's my daughter. She's 13.
Oh,
so,
wow.
So I go, okay, look. Yeah, so he starts to then begin to lay in to say everything he's been thinking for the last 10 minutes. And I said, sir, let's go outside. Let's just finish talking outside. So we go outside and he's like, he's in my face. I'm going to kick the hell out of you. I can't believe you would say something to a 13-year-old girl. And now, as he's telling me this, he's also qualifying that the reason he's not kicked the ever-loving shit out of me yet is because she's not supposed to be there. And she wasn't. It's a 21 and up bar. It's part of your verbal contract with anybody you do comedy for that they're going to put people in the room who are of age. And this is the reason why. I see her, this woman's bigger than my wife. She's 13. I assume I can make the outline of her like head out. I can see that she has a bottle. She's sticking it in her mouth. I can't tell what age she is.
Well, absolutely. And did you explain that to them that, hey, when you're on stage, you can't see the audience?
He didn't know that. And after he had kind of gotten down to a more of a frontal lobe conversation with me, he said, okay, I'll buy that. I didn't know you can't see. I haven't been on stage before. So we ended up in a place where I was not. And so he's part of this surprise party. He knows everybody. They all know this girl. They know this dad, this girl. They all, they're all like, she's crying. And her problem, and she's 13, she's a kid. And her problem is, oh my God, I've been embarrassed in front of a lot of people I know. So she's in a bad place. So I really felt bad for the girl. I felt bad for the dad too. I'm a dad. And, if anybody's going to say anything to hurt my son's feelings or something like that, I'd be livid, no matter what the circumstances are. So I let the guy say what he needed to say. And, I said my piece back to him and let him know what's going on. But, it was bad, dude. It was, this guy's just furious. And I can tell it's taken everything he's got not to just lay me out right there. And, I'm like, what, this could happen. I'm ready for him to throw a punch at me. And what's so insane about this is, when I told the other comics, they just laughed their asses off. And it's because it's me. I'm the cleanest comic they know. I'm the last person who's going to do something confrontational. And in general, I'm a confrontational person. That's, if you get to know me, people know that I'm not I call it like I see it. I'm a straight shooting individual, but I'm also a respectful person. And a lot of my stuff's very family oriented because that's, people don't buy it otherwise. And if that can happen to me, it can happen to anybody.
Oh, absolutely.
That's the lesson, right? Like, I feel like if you take up the microphone, you stand on stage, you talk into enough microphones in front of enough crowds, no matter who you are or how well-meaning your intentions, you're eventually going to really piss someone off.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's not because you were trying to.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's funny that you told me the story, because I just, and this is going to be a future episode, I just recorded an episode before we got on here that'll be coming out probably in March, and that was a topic that we talked about, because in that conversation with this comic, we talked about how you can say something on stage and upset somebody, and at the end of the day, you're not trying. That's not the end goal of doing comedy.
Right.
The end goal is to make everybody happy. So that's a little teaser for way in the future. Look for that in March, because you'll if you listen to this episode and then you listen to that episode, you're going to see what I'm talking about and how that ties in, because it's really spot on the conversation I just had.
Well, yeah, very nice.
Before this, so
yeah,
well,
very
man,
relevant.
I'm glad you didn't get your face broken and you're still here to record the podcast.
Yeah, I could be telling you about how I got my ass kicked by a bunch
Yeah,
of
that's
cops.
true. And I guess, if you would have, that would have saved me from having to, let you go and you filing unemployment for a job that doesn't pay you.
All right. Damn, your disability. Yeah, if you're a comic and you get your ass kicked out for a show, you're not gonna be able to claim disability from anybody.
No, exactly. That's the unfortunate part. Wow. Well, that was a great story, and also, and a great lesson. So, very good lesson. So, if you're listening,
Right.
you gotta keep that in mind. Anybody can offend anybody if the circumstances are right, and I think you made the right call trying to take it outside and have that conversation, because a lot of people don't know that when you're on stage, you can't see.
Yeah.
And
A younger me would have been defensive about it and would have escalated it to a point where it would have gotten bad. I definitely had some experience.
Well, and I think for most people, as soon as he would have said that was my 13-year-old daughter, my first response would have been, "What the F are you doing bringing your kid to the bar?"
Yeah, exactly.
And then I'd be like, if you don't want your kid to be, whatever, don't bring him to a comedy show in a bar where they don't belong. And then I would have walked off. But
Right.
but I wasn't there. You handled it the appropriate way. But all right, we got to get into this episode. We have a great episode today. Korey David, a fantastic comedian from the Denver area that I've got to work with a couple of times, a handful of times. I just got to be on his podcast, which we're going to promote that for him, because he has some live shows coming up, I think, but in Vietnam. He's about to go to Vietnam. By the time this comes out, he's in Vietnam for a whole month, just kind of on vacation, and I think he might be doing a couple shows over there, but neither here nor there. Got a fantastic podcast. It's called Interrogation True Crime Stories, and basically he interviews comedians, and those comedians, they talk about some dumb news stories relating true crime, and then each comedian tells a story of a time that they allegedly committed a crime. So it's a lot of fun. I had a good time being on the podcast on the most recent episode, and then I listened to one because I was just curious, and I loved it so much I binged his whole season, or the whole series, whatever you want to say. All the episode he's got, I binged it. I'm all caught up now. And it's because it's an easy listen. Each episode's about 30, 40 minutes long. So yeah, if you enjoy this conversation that we're about to have with Korey, go check out his podcast, Interrogation True Crime Stories. All right, without further ado, let's get into this conversation with Korey. Enjoy.
And now, it's time for the stand-up soundbite.
Somebody told me recently I look like if a corgi became a real boy. So you agree? Is what I'm getting. Okay, that's fair. All right, so women say that men are dogs, like it's a bad thing. But I don't really get it, because dogs are the best, right? Yeah, you know. Yeah. They're loyal, they love you unconditionally, and they lick butts sometimes. That's pretty good. Some people might say that's the best part, to be completely honest. And I get it if you're not into that, but hear me out. Like, I'm a margarita man. If you put salt on the rim of just about anything, and if you don't like the taste, it's just like doing a shot, you know? Tequila, lime, butthole, lime. You make the face, and then you do it again because you want people to like you. That's it's called dating in your 30s. Basically been the last year of my life. Listen, I don't necessarily like it either, but I want a callback, you know? Do you want to know what's worse than licking butts? Being alone. Okay. Messing around. I recently became an uncle. Thank you. I had very little to do with it. That's how that's supposed to work. My brother and his wife had a baby, and a couple of months ago they had their gender reveal party. And for their big gender reveal, they used a cake. Apparently the way that it works is you cut into the cake, whatever style of cake it is determines what flavor of baby you get, or something like that. I'm not exactly sure how it works. So I asked my brother, I'm like, do you know what kind of cake it is? And he said, no, we gave the test results to a bakery, and we find out at the same time everybody else does. You mean to tell me there's a baker at Safeway that knows the gender of your cake before you do? That's insane. That's a lot of trust. He doesn't even let me borrow his car, you know? So there are two people on the planet with this pertinent information. A licensed medical physician and somebody that draws Mickey Mouse on sheet cakes part-time.
It's the art of bombing. Sweet. So we're good.
Oh, we're good.
We're good. We're
good.
We're recording. So we were supposed to do this a couple weeks ago, but the weather prevented that.
Weather permitting, and they did not permit.
No, weather did not permit.
I mean, literally a freak storm that I don't think anybody really predicted. It shut down the entire country.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's why I was like, it was looking pretty hairy. And you're like, well, if the roads are clear, I'll still try to make it. I'm like, you're kind of an idiot. You're kind of... It's a podcast, bro. We can do this whenever. You know what I mean? But you were like, and then what'd you say? Your car was stuck?
No, not my car. Just other cars were.
Oh.
They had to keep closing the interstate from Loveland to Denver.
Yeah.
Because people were either getting into accidents or getting stuck.
God, the dedication
And
of a comic.
And that's what I was like. Oh well, if the road's closed, well then I'm staying.
Oh my God, yeah, it's amazing what lengths comics will go to for a gig. You know,
Oh, absolutely.
like if it's like a blizzard, and they're like, "Is the show still on? I'll take that $25." You know?
Yeah. No, exactly. I hate when shows get canceled for weather. I mean, I get it because obviously you want to be safe or whatever, but it sucks because it happens, and I know it does. But it's like, because when that happens for a comedian, you're just out the money. It's
You
not
are,
like
yeah.
If you work at a regular job, and not every regular job is like this, but if you work at a regular job, there's a good chance that if they have any benefits whatsoever, you're going to have some kind of paid time off that you can use, whether it's a vacation day or PTO or whatever. With comedy, you don't get that. You're just out that money.
Yes, you are.
They don't pay you that money.
How often do you book gigs that have like cancellation fees? You know what I mean, or like a cancellation rate?
You know, I don't ever. I don't think I've ever booked a show where I was getting paid if it got canceled.
So
I do deposits is what I do. Like, so when I do corporate stuff, I will require a non-refundable deposit.
Okay. And then hope for bad weather.
Yeah, and then hope for bad weather. Exactly.
Like, well, I've already got enough to cover my rent. So.
But a lot of times, gigs like that, they'll get rescheduled.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's not like, like I had a show down here in Denver that I was supposed to do, and it got canceled because of the weather. Okay, well, I still haven't been rebooked. Not that and it may not be. It might be a situation where they're not doing any shows now. You know what I mean? Like, so there's no guarantee that it's going to get.
Well, it's also hard
rebooked.
too because like they probably already have the next couple ones booked out.
Oh yeah,
You know
absolutely.
what I mean?
There's
So then
that
they're
too.
like,
Yeah.
Shit, now you can't even get up for like 3 or 4 shows, and if it's a monthly,
Yeah.
that's 3 or 4 months down the line. that
Yep,
you're
exactly.
You're not getting rebooked for. But I've been in a situation once. It was like when I ran a show back in New York, and the headliner got pissed at me because we had to cancel we were going to cancel the show, and then he was just like, "Hey, I'm counting on this money. Usually, I have like a 60% kind of cancellation like fee if it's within like 48 hours or 24 hours or something." I was like, shit. So we wound up actually doing the show, but that was the first time that it ever really had come up for me. And that was when I was pretty like new into comedy. I was like a year and a half in or something like that. But now if somebody's like traveling or they're kind of counting on that money, I'll pay them like a third of what I owed them. And then everybody that's a local, I'm like, I'll just rebook you,
Yeah. And that's pretty commendable thing to do. I don't know that that's so common everywhere. And even with that comic who was like, hey, this is my fee if the show gets canceled, did you sign a contract?
We didn't, but he was like a guy that I knew and somebody that I was like friendly with, and he'd helped me out with some stuff. So I just didn't know. I also didn't know any better.
Yeah, for sure.
Producing like a monthly local comedy show in upstate
even that
New York,
comic could be, even he should know better. It's
yeah,
wait,
I agree.
I think he was just playing on the fact that you were new. You
Probably,
know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I don't doubt it. So
because I get. Because he's right in the sense where I'm depending on this money. I've, booked this show. That means I can't do, another show because I've already booked this.
Sure,
There's not enough time. So I get that. But there are circumstances where things are going to happen and you just can't do it. Weather, COVID, things like that. But the thing is while you might not be able to do it then, you can reschedule it.
It does suck when you are on the road, like you're already out on the road.
Oh, absolutely.
And a gig gets canceled. You're like, even though it might not have even been that much money, you're like, that's $50 that I kind of,
needed.
Yeah, because I mean, especially with where I'm at with a lot of road gigs these days, I'm doing a lot of showcases when I go to popular towns for sure, which is just kind of standard across the board. And the most you're going to get for those is like $25, $30 doing 10 minutes, and even though that doesn't seem like a lot, you're like, well, I'm not making a lot on this entire trip anyway, so everything kind of counts.
Oh, yeah. If you could make any money to help at least help recuperate your costs, the money you spend to take those trips or whatever, it helps.
Yeah, and I mean, if it's sometimes depending on the spot, I might have been able to sell some merch there, so I could have doesn't seem like much, but you sell $30-$60 worth of merch and I was only getting paid $25, now all of a sudden I'm making way more money just selling the merchandise than I was even making like just doing the spot specifically. So
what kind of merch do you sell?
So like right now I just have koozies that have little punchlines on them that from some of my jokes, but I'm working right now with an artist to make an adult coloring poster that's kind of a collage of a bunch of my bits that we're going to leave colorless and printed on like a slightly nicer paper so that I can sell those instead. Because I'm kind of getting sick of selling the koozies. Because like sometimes you're beholden to like having to say that joke, in order to sell it. Otherwise, it doesn't really make as much sense.
No, but, for sure.
So I wanted to come up with something that was representative of like a bunch of my material. And even if I don't use some of the jokes that are on the poster, it still just looks cool. And one of the things I was doing some, one of my exes was like really big into adult coloring books. So when I was thinking about Christmas or birthday gifts, whichever it was, I was like, I'll go buy her some adult coloring books. So I went on Amazon and I found out it was the #1 selling style of book on Amazon.
I believe it.
Yeah,
they're popular.
Yeah, so I was just thinking, well, I don't want
to. A lot of people
do
it for it's good. It's like stress relief.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Helps with anxiety
it's very zen, or you just have the mind of a child, whichever it is. I don't really care as long as you buy it. I don't
exactly right. As long as you buy my book, that's all that matters.
Yeah,
my poster.
and even with the posters or with the koozies, I just do I do donation instead of charging a price for them because what I've found is that, like, just as an example, the koozies cost 60 cents, right?
Yep.
Even if somebody gives me $1, I'm still technically making a profit on it. But most people will give you at least $5. And if I don't put a cap on it, people will give you $20. I've had people give me $50 for a koozie before because ultimately they just want to show you that they really appreciated your time and they had a good time. And it's weird just to hand you $50.
Yeah, it's just for nothing. Yeah, there's got to be some kind of a transaction.
Yeah, so as long as there's an exchange of goods happening, they're willing to give you the money, and I'm not about to just put a cap on how much they're going to give me because like $5 or $10 for a koozie seems fair. It's like, no. It's like most of the time I've had people pay me in quarters before, and I'm like, you can just keep it. But it's but ultimately it's just like merch is what you make, especially being, low-level headliner, feature, showcase comedian when you're going around the country. Merch is where you actually make money that helps salvage the trip.
And that's one thing I've been having a lot of discussions with people about this because it frustrates me. I see people who are like, they'll take gigs that pay nothing and, don't provide lodging and all these low-paying gigs, and they're like, well, I'm going to make money on merch. And it's like, well, that's great, but however, the reason comedy doesn't pay anymore because comics keep doing this. Your merch,
should be all bonus.
Yeah.
The gig itself should pay for, if you're headlining a gig, you're taking this headlining gig, the gig should pay your fee, so that you're making money from your travel expenses. They should cover your lodging. They should do all the things that you're at least making a little bit of money on that, and then your merch is a bonus.
Yeah.
Where most gigs, it's the other way around, where it's like they barely pay you, but if you sell enough merch, that's when you make your money.
If it's local, I'll take it. Or I'm like going to be in a city for like a week, I'll take.
But
lower
that's
paying
different.
gig.
But
Yeah.
that's different. Like that's not the same of driving into the middle of nowhere
I know,
for
yeah.
like $100, no lodging, on the hope that you're going to make all your money on
I completely
merch.
agree. I've been on both sides, well, not both sides, but on two sides of that recently, where somebody asked me if I'd be down to headline something, and great guy, but it was like a gig up in Wyoming, and I'm in Denver, so I told him he told me how much it was, and I think it was maybe $150 or something, and I was like, hey, but I think you're great, but just so you know, like this is I can't just because. Like let's just say this, like after we factor in the gas money and there's no lodging, right? No, like I'm gonna make like $20 on that gig, maybe, because it was a pretty hefty drive. It would have been like 5 hours or something like that. And then I had my friend Shelton, who runs really great comedy shows out in Grand Junction. The organization's called Joke Junction. You should look them up on Instagram and Facebook. He reached out and he said, hey, we're trying to get bigger people out here. What's kind of like the going rate for headliners, for somebody from Denver, Salt Lake, which are their two closest cities, to come out? And I was like, well, just think of this. It's Grand Junction is this many miles away from both cities. That's a tank of gas, right, to get there. A tank of gas these days costs this much. So it's 2 tanks of gas, and it's like a 4-hour drive, which kind of sucks because some people will drive back that night. But if you have something to offer, like a hotel or like a nice guest room or something, then they might be willing to take it for a little less money because they know they're not going to have to spring for a room. So factor like that kind of stuff in and make it worth their time for that. Because I would still want, like, after you take gas out of the equation, I would still want to make at least $150.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you should. Yeah.
So that would just be my line of logic.
And that's the way more. I agree that's the kind of logic people need to have, but they don't. Everybody's a lot of comedians are so greedy for stage time. They're just like, I'll just take the gig. I just want the stage time, and then hopefully I'll make money on merch, and then and then suddenly they're homeless, and we feel bad. But that's what happens.
But what I will say is that I'm not that. I'm still nobody. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like I still can't. Like one of my favorite things to tell my dad. Sometimes we'll do like little recap calls after a weekend on the road or something and be like, how'd it go? And I'm like, I'm still not a draw. So like I'm not going to be the reason people come, but I can do a great job if they do. You know what I mean?
But that's the thing though that happens with a lot of like where our level of comedy where we're at, people a lot of times aren't going to comedy shows anyway for one particular comedian. I mean, unless you're a big household name, they're just going to a comedy show. And they could care less who's going to be there as long as they're funny.
No, I agree. But I will say that there's certain experiences that you kind of have to have just to learn.
Oh, absolutely.
And have that I call it like kind of recon missions. Like just as an example, I think it's 2 summers ago, I did it was one of my first headlining runs, maybe my first headlining run ever, out to Salt Lake, and I stopped in Grand Junction on the way out there and on the way back. So I bookended it with a Thursday, Sunday, and then I did shows in Salt Lake Friday and Saturday. I didn't get paid enough to make the trip worth it. The thing that kind of made it worth it for me was that I mountain bike a lot. So I brought my mountain bike, did some riding in Grand Junction, did some riding in Salt Lake. So I knew that one was going to be kind of more of like, I get to just do this trip on a little bit of a discount. But it really wasn't until I went to Salt Lake that I was like, oh, there really isn't anything here besides Wise Guys. Like I was kind of expecting for a bigger city to have there must be at least a couple shows happening Fridays and Saturday nights that are independent, and there just isn't. And not that the shows that I did were bad. I had a great time. But you would hope that for a big city, you're like, okay, I'm headlining, I'm coming into town. Can we stack 2 shows a night, on one of these nights to make a little bit more money, sell some merch, like whatever, and it just didn't. So now I know that unless I'm going to be at Wise Guys, like if somebody invites me to open for them or something, I'm not going back to Salt Lake. But conversely, you know, I went out to Omaha in the spring, and I had a great time, and I got paid really well. You know, and Omaha isn't necessarily like a glamorous town.
No, but there's a lot of great shows in Omaha.
There's a lot of great shows.
It's a great, like, hub.
Yeah.
Great stop. It's a good, like, on your way to, you know, to and from places.
Yeah, absolutely. And now I know that. And now I'm going back to Omaha, you know, and I just did a headlining run out in Oregon where I was doing my storytelling show out there. Shows were great, made good money. I'm going back there, you know, but it's because I went, you know, I had to go figure it out.
Oh, absolutely. I agree. You got to do that to some extent. I think it's just, but it's the way I look at that too is you're looking for it's not about just doing the gig for the stage time. You're looking for more value. And that's just like, I've had conversations with people. I had somebody hit me up about headlining their show. The money wasn't very good. And I told them, it's not for me. I said, I'm at a level where I'm not going to do a show for that amount of money because I'm a big advocate for comics getting paid their worth. And, you know, and then I explained to that comic what we, you know, what we pay comics for our shows, and our shows are showcases or whatever. But I also said the other thing I'd look for is value. That's not just money. What am I going to get out of this that's not money? Is there going to be somebody else that's producing a show that's going to see me, so then I have potentially to work with them. So I look for other value, like, oh, will this lead to more work?
Yeah.
You know, like, because then it might be worth not getting paid as much if I know there's a chance that I'm going to make some connections with people who actually produce shows. Because there's a difference in networking with other comics and networking with comics/producers.
Yeah, and I mean, that's comedy festivals are a good example of that, right? Like, typically most of the comics on a festival aren't getting paid.
No.
Right?
Yep.
But they can be a great experience, you know? For me, I decided that I was only going to submit to festivals that either had high value, like industry or something along, or a prestige or something along those lines, or someplace I really wanted to go. You know, so I did the Alaska Before You Die Fest earlier this year because they covered your lodging. It's Alaska. So I'm like, yeah, $25 submission fee for a potentially like half price trip to Alaska. Sign me up, you know? And that was totally worth it. I met some really amazing people there. The shows were fun. Some of them were like, some of them were okay, and then others were really fun. But it was an amazing experience, you know? And I got to hang out with some really awesome people and make some cool connections, and it definitely was worth it.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's great, too, when festivals do try to put a little more effort into that. Like the festival that I produce, we've been providing lodging since we started.
Yeah.
Like, that was one of the biggest factors. I was like, when we decided to do it, it was like, we got to give the comics something. You know, they're not going to get paid. They're going to have to pay to come out here. Got to give them something besides the networking.
Yeah, I don't.
And it's amazing how huge that is.
I don't. Yeah, it really does. I mean, it amazes me that you know. Well, I get why festivals don't offer anything if they don't have to, because there's so many comics that just like also feel like being a part, like submitting to festivals, being a part of festivals is what they're supposed to do, or what they should do to elevate their career. But again, if it's not in like a cool place or has like can help you in some way, like prestige wise or
are you telling me Sioux Falls is not cool?
You offered hotels.
Yeah, but that's good. You didn't submit.
I know. I'm gonna go ahead and tell you, South Dakota isn't high on my list. Now I do like you and I like Nathan a lot, but that wasn't in the cards for me this year.
Just like, hey. Wait a minute. No.
No. I think that the fact that you guys offer lodging is awesome and huge.
Oh, yeah.
And gives people a really great reason to want to submit.
Well, and I think, too, with that, I think it also helps that we're a nonprofit and people actually see what we're doing.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of festivals that'll say that they're a nonprofit and they'll say that they're donating money to something, but you never see that actually take place. You know, and a majority of festivals, I think, are just, you know, for profit, which I get that, great. But, you know, we're actually showing, you know, that we're making an impact with what we're doing. And I think that's another thing that helps with us with comics. They're like, oh, well, even if I don't get in, it's at least going to a good cause.
Yeah.
Because they're doing something good. It's not just a bunch of greedy people running off with a big fat paycheck at the end of the year. You know?
One of the things that kind of burned me on festivals initially was that I had submitted to one festival and I got a message from somebody that said, "Hey, don't tell anyone, but I'm on like the board for this festival, and I saw your tape and I thought it was amazing. You're going to get my highest vote, my highest recommendation." I'm like, "Oh my God, that's so sweet. Thank you very much." And I didn't get in. So then I was just kind of like, it made me think about like, so what's actually going into this process of selecting? And I just kind of made the conscious decision that if I want to go to Sioux Falls, I'm just going to go to Sioux Falls. You know, like I know you, I know Nathan, I know some other connections in like the Midwest area there. Like I'm just gonna go. Like if I want to go to Atlanta, I'm not gonna submit to a festival. I'm just gonna go. Yeah. And I mean I do understand that maybe I have that luxury a little bit because I work a remote job, so I can work from anywhere, you know, so I can book a flight, and I usually book flights, you know, with points like from my credit cards and stuff like, and
that's a good life hack, ladies and gentlemen. If you listen to this podcast, the life hack is get a remote job.
Yeah,
so then you don't have to go homeless.
I know, and dude, don't get me wrong. I didn't always have a remote job. You know, it's something I'd kind of worked towards and lucked into a little bit, and I understand that's not.
I would say either having a remote job or a really flexible job, or like that way, because a lot of comics, you know, they won't work because they're you know, they don't want to commit to a job, and I get it because you want to be able to run off and do comedy, but it's like you also want to pay your bills too.
Yeah,
and that's having that flexibility and
and trust me, I get that I might have that job because I'm a cis white cuck piece of shit, but I also tried really hard to get to that job and got a degree and experience so that I could get to that position. And because of that, I was joking about that, by the way.
But you don't have a college degree?
No, I'm joking about being a cuck white piece of shit. I am a white piece of shit. I'm not a cuck. And
I'm joking. I really am.
Yeah,
I know it.
But my point is only that, like, I can book a trip and because I can work all day, I'm really not losing any money on the trip, you know, and hopefully get paid enough on the gigs and whatnot to not only break even, but actually make some money on that trip.
Mm-hmm. How do you work, like, when you're, you know, you have a remote job? I'm curious because I have a remote job, mostly remote job too. But, like, if you go on a tour and say you're doing, like, a string of one-nighters, how do you get work done? Like, you know, because that's one thing that I think about is, like, it's hard to get work done because you drive to the place, then you got to go do the show, then get up, drive to the next place. There's not a lot of time in between to do the work.
I haven't done a lot of extended, like, miles trips where you're going from one town to the next. Gotcha. Most of my out-of-town work has usually been going to one place and kind of staying there for a week. Gotcha. You know, like, I'll go down to Austin for a week. I'll go to Atlanta for a week. I'll go to L.A. for a week. You know what I mean? And I'm usually staying at a friend's place so that I can just work, like, at their house or something like that.
Okay. Yeah. That's something I've been thinking about doing myself, actually, is exactly what you said, going just now that I have a job, just being like, you know what? I want to go hang out here and do some comedy. And I can also go work, so go spend a few days in L.A.
But the juxtaposition there is that, you know, the in-between gigs, the one-nighters that you're talking about, typically pay more than if you're going to L.A. or if you're going to a big city or something along those lines, you know. So definitely something I've thought about, and I've been planning, like, my whole 2023, like, tour schedule and stuff, and I'm already factoring in some weeks where I'll be in the car doing more that style road work as opposed to just like dropping myself in one city.
And how are you planning for that to be able to do your job too?
I'm not sure.
More of like, I've banked some PTO or paid time off and just use it for that, or
that'll probably be times where, if I've got like a whole day's worth of driving ahead of me, I mean, or there's certain things that I can do, like, over the phone, like certain calls and things like that I know I can be on the call and contribute, and the calls take like an hour. So even if that's all right, I worked 2 hours today, that's still, you know, 2 hours of work that I'm getting paid for that I didn't have before. So
absolutely
harder for sure, but
not completely impossible.
Yeah, I haven't been in that position yet, so I'm not exactly sure. But if push comes to shove, I also like I can take days off without it being PTO. So if I have, let's just say, you know, I rack up a decent amount of hours in the previous pay period, and I don't really need to work for 3 days, I don't have to burn the PTO, and yeah, I'll get a little less on the next paycheck, but I still have like 2 days that week that I can actually do some work.
Mm-hmm.
So,
oh, well, that's great. That's a good thing to have. So, yeah, if you need to get a good job, go do that. Go get a degree and find yourself a nice remote job.
Yeah, just go sell your soul to a college and be in $50,000 worth of debt, and you'll be making money doing road gigs in no time.
You know, it's funny because a lot of people joke. They're like, "Yeah, I quit comedy to pursue, or I quit college to pursue comedy." I'm like, I quit. Well, I didn't quit, but I took comedy to get me to pursue college.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I went and got my degree after I started doing comedy. I was like, you know what? I need a little extra security here.
Yeah.
But when I went to college, too, I went for something that I could use for comedy. You know, I got a degree in business and marketing. Mm-hmm. So it was like things that could get me a regular job, but also really help with the comedy stuff.
Yeah, some applicable skills.
Yeah, so it wasn't just, I got to go get an extra, another job or whatever.
Yeah, that's one of the other parts of my job that has been beneficial is that I do like copywriting and videography stuff for a company, and I have film and audio equipment that I just have it, so I can use it personally if I want to. And it's gotten me, because I have to edit video, I've just gotten better at using programs like Premiere. And those are things that obviously translate to the comedy world, being in our social media age where editing video and putting up clips is so important that, I've started to kind of skill stack a little bit and been able to translate some of those things into comedy. Whereas if I didn't have to, if I wasn't doing videography or video editing stuff, I just wouldn't know, and I'd have to just take it upon myself to learn it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think that's interesting too, because we have a Facebook group for this podcast, and I try to get a conversation started in there about that exact thing, about what skills have you, for people who have regular gigs, what skills are they taking from those regular gigs and able to apply to comedy, and then vice versa, because there's things you learn in comedy that come in helpful for a regular job.
Yeah,
too,
if Theo Vaughn ever needs a mean latte, you're his guy.
Exactly.
Yeah. Or if he needs to know how to stock these vegetables, I can help.
Oh, I love it. Well, let's get into this. We've been chit-chatting about all kinds of fun comedy stuff, but we got to get into the bombing part of it.
Okay.
I'd love to hear your story.
So there were two that came to mind. One's newer and one's older. But the original is when I was kind of first trying to start getting into comedy. I'd probably been doing it for a year, and at that point, you are taking those gigs that don't make any sense.
You're taking anything to get that time.
Yeah. So at the time, I was living in Saratoga Springs, New York, which is about 40 minutes north of Albany, and it's about 2.5 hours from Syracuse, which is where I grew up. There's a Funny Bone in Syracuse that I was trying to get into, whether I should have or not, because I was so new, doesn't matter. But I had talked to the GM and nothing. And then out of the blue, one day she texted me and said, "Hey, can you come host tonight?" And it was like a Thursday. And that night was like a huge blizzard in upstate New York. It must have snowed like 2 feet. And I was like, yeah, of course, I'll come, right? So my friend came with me.
And trying to come down and do a podcast with you.
No. I know, right? Hey, I was a younger man. You're this old now.
And I'm still not smart.
Yeah. So my friend came with me. It took like 4 hours to get there instead of 2.5. And you've been in like Funny Bones before. They're huge rooms usually.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's 300-400 people.
Yeah. This one in particular was just that size, and I think they had like 12 or 15 tickets sold to the show, and we were all thinking, all right, there's no way they're actually going to do this, right? So 15 minutes before showtime, they're like, yep, it's going. They didn't seat anybody at the venue, so they just let everybody sit where they want.
Oh, okay. I was like, what? They just made them stand in the back?
No.
Oh, I gotcha.
Worse, because maybe they would have walked up front.
Yeah,
maybe they would have walked closer to the stage. So they're just scattered around this 300-person room.
That's always the worst.
Eating nachos and cocktails named after Rodney Dangerfield. You know what I mean? And One of the people that came was my mom. So my parents have always been like really supportive of my comedy career, and when I'm back home, they usually try to come to a show. My mom and my friend did sit in the front row, and I'm eating shit like crazy because I was also still, I'm only doing what I know kind of works at the time, and I'm more being a presenter instead of actually being a comedian, kind of like being in the room, I just didn't have that wherewithal at the time. And I'm telling this story, I don't even remember what it was, but I can hear my mom telling my friend, that's not how that happened.
Your friend's throwing you under the bus. Like, that's not how that happened.
No, my mom.
Oh, your mom said it to your friend.
My mom said that to my friend.
Oh, I thought your friend said it to your mom.
No.
Oh, that's even funnier.
Yeah.
Your mom threw you under the bus.
So my mom is like unknowingly heckling me while I'm on stage. She doesn't get it. And again, if I had had the wherewithal at the time, what I would have done is say, hey, this is my mom. This is what's happening. And maybe talk to her a little bit, try to get some other people involved, like whatever,
like, my mom's the one doing this, yeah, don't you have a mom that never shuts up,
Yeah, and it went so bad. I mean, nobody did great that night. The headliner had to do like 45 minutes, and at that point, like, what do you even do? I mean, my line of logic these days is if it's a crowd of like less than 15 people, they're all scattered around, I try to do as little like material as possible until they kind of get going a little bit. And even if I'm not doing crowd work, it's usually a lot of like me picking on them or talking about their appearance or maybe just riffing on whatever I'm thinking about or what happened that day, just to make it seem more like an intimate kind of experience rather than just being up there and presenting like a TV show. Yeah. Because I've done that before too, and I know a lot of comics that do that, and I don't think it's not that anybody's doing anything wrong. I just think we work really hard on our jokes so that we can walk into the perfect scenario and just go up there, tell the jokes, and get out, right? Yep. But I just don't think that really works in kind of like a really small group,
Yeah, it really, and it depends too on venues too, because sometimes that doesn't work at bar shows either. Yeah. Even if it's a packed bar show, because people are, it's a bar, I'm here to be rowdy or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm curious, because I've seen you live, we've worked together, and I've seen you do crowd work and do riffing, and you're really good at it. What are things that you did to like try to work that tool or sharpen that tool to get better at that?
I think it started more out as kind of if there was a weird reaction in the crowd, just kind of highlighting that, just saying something about it. And then if I see somebody in the crowd that just strikes me a particular way, whether it's a dumb hat or a shirt they're wearing or something like that.
Or a mustache in the case of the show that we did.
Yeah, totally. This guy was wearing this and there was a dude with like a pineapple shirt hat. That was a total swingers community. That's definitely a swingers community. It is. I talked to them about it afterwards.
Oh, did you really? Oh,
yeah,
wow.
It was this we were doing this gig at a country club a country club that was
it was
in a
neighborhood. It was part of a country club, a golf place in the middle of a neighborhood, essentially.
Yeah, very well to do people or whatever that all live in this little oasis in northern Colorado. And it definitely, I talked to them about it because we hung out at the bar afterwards, and they were like, oh yeah, everybody fucks everybody around here. You can see whoever, because they all have their own golf carts, and they're like, yeah, it's not uncommon to see so-and-so driving around with somebody else's so-and-so on their golf cart. And I'm just like, all right, you guys got a life up here. You live on your own private golf course. You're fucking everybody. It's like
a whole different world.
Yeah, it is. It is. They got their own little one, like Disneyland up there. The place is dope.
That was a good time.
So and then it kind of changed and evolved, and where I knew certain reactions would kind of happen with certain jokes. So I would do a joke about mushrooms, and you'd get a laugh about the joke, and I would say something like, "Oh, it sounds like somebody's tripping right now." And even just by talking about something that's just happening in the room, for some reason, people love that. Mm-hmm. They love it being about what's going on right now, as opposed to they can obviously like the jokes too, but anytime you can kind of bring it in the room, it seems to enhance the show.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Now it does go the other way too, where you like make fun of somebody or call somebody out, and people go, "Oh!" And I found that at smaller shows because all of a sudden there's like
they're more self-conscious.
He just made fun of one of the 12 people that are here, you know. And I'm just, but it's the same concept, you know. It's just like I'm just goofing around, you know. And something somebody told me one time, well, a couple things were like, don't ever be meaner to them than they are to you, and then just say whatever dumb things on your mind and just see where it goes, kind of thing, because whatever you say is only going to last about 5 or 10 seconds, and you can just move on from that. You know, like you can recover if it didn't work, you know, and just move.
Unless you're really down the hole.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then it's just a matter of pushing through.
Yeah, unless you Kramered it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can get out of that position, you know. That's why I always try to riff up top on something I just observed or something that I thought about that day, because on the plus side, it could help make the show more intimate, get people on your side sooner. And then on the flip side, the worst thing that's probably going to happen is you just burned 20 seconds. Mm-hmm. You know, that's kind of just the way that I've always thought about it. And I think I don't necessarily love doing this, but it's always easier to pick on people with blue material. You know, because
absolutely.
It's like kind of embarrassing, you know what I mean? So I'm trying to get better about riffing on things that have nothing to do with sex or nothing to do with drugs. But that's just part of like the growing process too.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's part of not just like with the riffing. That's growing as a comedian altogether.
Yeah.
You know, because I feel like most comedians when they start, they, you know, a majority kind of lean more blue when they first start because you don't know any better and you're doing, you know, dumb, gross jokes and swearing and all the things that you don't realize don't really help the comedy, you know?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that
they can, but
yeah. One of the things that was kind of challenging for me or has been at times is like, so the way I always was funny to my friends before I was a comedian was talking about my sex life because I'd always had a pretty promiscuous sex life. And I would just tell these ridiculous stories about like experiences that I had. And that's how I always, you know, got people laughing. And because people are like, oh my God, I can't believe that or whatever. So just as an example, you know, one of like my openers / closers I would use for a while. So when I sell merch for is about this story about me, the first time I ever ate somebody's ass. And while eating ass is like kind of in like the comedy zeitgeist right now. You know, there's so many people that make a joke about that.
Yeah,
that is true, but it doesn't mean that didn't happen to me.
Oh,
you know what I mean? So
yep.
that's like the hard part is that it's like I know that's kind of like a hacky premise these days. You know, because so many people talk about it. But you're like, what do you want me? I mean, it still happened to me. You know? So I'm like,
I think that's part of it. Like even with hacky like premises, it's putting your spin and the fact that it's a story that's real to you. People, you know, if you took somebody that just, you know, a comedian that does a joke about eating ass, just whatever regular joke, and then they hear you do your joke, they're probably going to identify more with you because they can also tell that you're being genuine. You know, like. They know that, oh, wait, he's not lying. This isn't made up. This really happened to this person versus, oh, this is just a made up joke.
Yeah.
You know?
Totally.
So I think that gives you a little more leeway with that.
Well, it's like the same thing with like drug related stuff. It's like, I love psychedelics. I do psychedelics all the time. I literally just grinded up a bunch of mushrooms that I can break into capsules because I microdose. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Before you came over here. Like, so I talk about it because that is like a part of my life. And it's funny how I try to, you know, I just write what I'm thinking about at the time. You know, I don't actively try to write dirty or try to write clean or anything like that. it's kind of just what's come up. You know, like one of my bits that's been going the best recently is a story about my first kiss. You know, I just thought about it the other day and it started working. And I was like, oh, okay, well now I can work on that for a few weeks, you know? So it's hard to, because like everybody's always like, oh, you got to work clean. You should try to work clean. And it's like, yeah, you're right. But you know, I'm not going to force myself to be clean.
Yeah.
It's really more about like what I'm thinking about at the time and also what people are laughing at.
Mm-hmm. Oh, for sure. And I think part of that too, like I agree that I think everybody should have all kinds of tools in their tool belt. I think people should be able to work clean. They should be able to work dirty. They should be able to do it all. But ultimately, when it comes to like finding your voice or who you are on a stage, you got to do what's true to you, you know?
Yeah.
And if that's leaning more to blue comedy than it is clean, then so be it. If people are laughing and you're getting booked doing those shows, then who cares?
Yeah.
You know? So what if you can't go do a corporate gig? You just won't have as many bombing stories.
Right. Yeah, totally. And so going back to that story, the show went, as well as anybody would expect, and the GM actually, invited me back to like host for a weekend or whatever. And my mom always, like, again, super supportive. Even when I do like dirty material in front of my mom, there was one comedian that was the feature the first weekend that I was hosting, and he was like kind of dirty, but he wasn't like really dirty. And every single time, I talk to my mom about comedy, she's like, ugh, I just don't know why certain people have to be so dirty. You remember that guy? And this is years ago. You know what I mean?
Like, she still remembers.
She'll still bring it up.
That's
and
when you know that person was dirty.
And you're like, Mom, I've talked about like buttholes being like a margarita glass in front of you, and you're still talking about this other guy.
Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah, it's funny. It's strange how she does that. But so there was another one. Like, one of the things I thought this would be like good anecdotally, at least conversation wise, was when last time I was in New York, I did this spot called the Tiny Cupboard. I don't know if you've heard of it.
I've heard of the show. Yeah,
it's kind of like this bohemian style venue where there's like multiple levels, and they do shows in like different rooms like throughout the building or whatever. I did one show. I did like the 8 o'clock show, the downstairs venue. Totally ate shit. For one reason or another, like, well, they weren't really biting on anybody that was on the show. Of course, the guy that went after me did great, but like, I did not do well at all. And then I was on the 10 o'clock show, went upstairs, did basically the exact same set, and did awesome, did great, killed. So for no real reason whatsoever.
That's funny. Well, maybe it was the time, later crowd.
I have no idea. I mean, that's that I've had that happen like a couple times where I was doing something up in Maine one time, and like I was doing this one earlier show, and destroyed, absolutely dominated, and then went right across the street, basically across the street, and did another show and couldn't have eaten more shit.
Oh, that's always the worst.
It's like that. It's like that saying, like, or that itch that I feel like most comics have, right? When you just had a great show and you're like, let's go to the open mic. You're like, maybe just to hang out.
Yeah,
but like, I don't.
Oh, exactly. I've learned that lesson even at doing open. Like, I tried one night. I remember one night I bombed like 3 or 4 times in one night. And I was like, why'd you do that? Like, I bombed the first time at the open mic, and I'm like, well, there's another open mic. Got time to redeem myself. Bombed again. I'm like, well, let's go to this third one. Bombed again. I'm like, you know what? We need to call it a day.
Yeah,
this
but
is ridiculous.
Open mics can be a little different though, because I feel like those with mics, I'm trying to figure out what words are funny, because I wrote this thing,
for sure,
and I'm like, just one of them isn't a good judge, you know. So 2 or 3 is a better judge of like if there's something here or not, you know. I'm not trying to think about like, oh, I've never tried to kill at an open mic. Never. I'm always just like, I came here to work on this thing. I need to figure out what to get rid of and what to keep. And that hopefully I can carry that to the next one. I'll tweak it, and then I'll try it this way, and then I'll tweak it again, and then I'll go to the next one, and I'll try it this way. So that way I'm actually learning instead of worrying about, like, did I have the best set at open mic tonight? I don't really give a shit about that.
Oh, yeah. And that's like, that, you know, that was back years ago. For me, even now, like, I don't even look at, I don't consider, if I bomb at an open mic in what would be considered bombing, I don't consider it bombing. To me, at an open mic, the only way I bomb is if I don't go do what I set out to do. Like, now I set goals at open mics. It's like, I'm going to do this, whatever it is, or I'm going to try this joke a different way, or whatever the goals I set. That's what I'm going to do. But if I don't do it, that's when I'm like, well, I bombed because I didn't do what I set out to do tonight. I failed.
And you didn't get any laughs, like you went off the rails.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
bombed. You're like, shit.
Yep, exactly. And I've had that, like even at the fort. There was one night, I bombed hard, and I know why. I came off the top pretty aggressive because like nobody was laughing at anybody, like nobody was doing well, and I just was like, what the fuck is wrong with you guys? Like,
right.
But I did it in instead of in a fun joking way, it came off more of a pissed off, being an asshole way.
Angry.
Just angry, yeah. Oh, and you know what? And I was angry.
Yeah.
I mean, the truth is, I was angry. I was watching all these comics go, tell their jokes and bare their hearts and souls, and this crowd wasn't just like nothing. And I was just like, what the fuck is wrong with you people?
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
It's kind of like, I know we talked about this before, but how we said, I know we talked about this on my show, where laughter is contagious. That's what people always say. And you can tell, like, if a group of 50 people, everybody decided, hey, we're here to have some fun tonight, let's rip, And then somehow, some way, a group of 50 people can also decide to not laugh at all and to not have any fun.
And that was exactly what was going on.
You're like, we're 5 comics in on this lineup right now, and you hate everybody. Like, what's going on?
I guarantee you, though, after that, everybody did good after that. Because they were like, well, now we need to laugh because that guy was mean to us.
Yeah, we got called out a little bit.
He hurt our feelings.
I mean, sometimes you do have to do that. I'm more willing to do that in like a host spot where I was working at like a local club over a weekend, and there was one show where it was like pretty full audience and no real reason why it shouldn't be going well. And I did like 10 minutes, and at the end of my set, I just said, hey, just so you guys are aware, I don't really know what you want or what's going on, but I just did like 4 closers for you that I wasn't planning on doing. I'm basically doing gymnastics up here to get you guys to laugh. So I get it. You might not have liked me very much, but we have an amazing lineup of comedians here for you guys tonight. Order some drinks, but let's loosen up a little bit. Let's have some fun.
Have some fun.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. But, and again, like I said, in hindsight, I know exactly why I came off too aggressive and too mean, and that can happen. Like, when you call out an audience, you got to do it in a very elegant way. And I've seen that where I know a comic, we were doing a show at the Marine Training Center in San Diego, and they were heckling and just being jerks the whole night. And, and it wasn't a big group. Like, ended up being like a smaller group at the show, and they were all sitting on one big long table together, front row. And they were just, heckling and, doing what they wanted, they're like, we're having fun, blah, 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 we're going to be part of the show. And they were just rude to pretty much everybody. And the headliner went up, and he basically, but he did it in such an elegant way, because he went up there and just did like this teacher moment where he sat down and he was like, you guys as an audience suck. And you're not doing your job. And then he explained why they were in the bad. Like a teacher, he like laid it out, but he did it in a calm, just face-to-face manner. Like, he wasn't mean, he wasn't being like aggressive. He just calmly explained to them why they were a bad audience. Mm-hmm. And then he crushed.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. Well, it's like I said before, some advice that somebody had given me was, don't ever be meaner to them than they are to you, right? So.
Yep. Yeah. And that goes exactly to what your point with what I did. And I knew when I got off stage that night, I was like, yep, I didn't do the stuff I wanted to do, right? Because I came off angry and called them out and blah, blah, blah.
Have you ever done like a dab lounge show or a weed show?
I mean, not here. I've done weed shows.
Yeah,
in
those
San
are
Diego.
easy. I think those are pretty easy to feel like you bombed at.
Yes.
But it's like one of those shows that after doing a few, I kind of realized, I'm like, oh no, you're all having a really good time. You're all just like really high.
Yep.
Like you're all just stoned out of your minds. And it's not that you aren't getting laughs, but like they're kind of subdued and maybe a little quieter.
And when they do, it's also delayed.
Yeah.
That's the other thing I learned with doing like weed shows is that you tell a joke and you think, oh, they didn't like it. And then you start to panic because you're like, oh shit, now I'm going to bomb. And then you get ready to go into the next thing, and then suddenly they're all laughing.
Laughing.
Like, oh, damn it.
Yeah, I've learned particularly with those shows, you really got to slow down and maybe be more talkative instead of being like straight set up punchline and polished, because that's like they're literally hitting a dab rig with a Coleman propane tank. You know, they're not there. They're not there to see some like late night comic in a suit. You know what I mean? Because I did one when I was down in New Mexico. I was working down at Dry Heat Comedy Club. Shout out to those guys. If you're in the Albuquerque area, please go check them out. I'll actually be down there at the end of April. And
This isn't coming out till May. No,
that's fine. It happens to me all the time. I don't tell you when my show's getting released. Like, I'll try to.
This will come out way before April.
Like, I'll try to put your episode in before the Snow Jam, but I can't make a promise.
That's okay.
But I had booked this other gig because the money was really great, and it was at this just like super shady kind of dab lounge that wasn't technically like a business, and they were like bagging weed like right on the counter, and like I don't think they had a license for like anything, and like it was it wasn't actually like that bad of a space, and the guy that runs it's awesome. His name's Kevin, he's cool, and it was just like there was like 12 people there. You know, and they're all sitting in different parts of the room, all just getting like ridiculously baked because they're doing dabs instead of just like smoking weed, which has always been funny to me because I've never done a dab because weed even gives me anxiety. But people are like, oh, if you hit a dab, you're not going to want to do anything for the rest of the day. I'm like, I can do that already. I don't need to. I don't need to hit a dab. But that except people go to lounges and do this stuff.
Yeah, as somebody that has done one dab, I can confirm.
Yeah, that's the case.
You will not want to do anything.
So I feel like your kind of recipe for success already isn't there, and then by the time I got up, there was probably like 5 or 6 people, that were actually in the venue. And I'm doing half an hour. And at that point, there's really only so much I can do, I feel like. I try to do a little crowd work, try to do material, try to riff a little bit. And it didn't go great. It went fine, but fine. It probably wasn't even that. But the comic that went before me, Rosalie James Taylor, is a Fort Collins comic. She's amazing. She did great. She had like a little bit more of an audience, and she really did a great job of like engaging them, being different. And then I went up and I was just like, all right, well, that wasn't awesome, But then, you got the rest of the weekend to kind of recover, and we had some great shows. And I'm just like, yeah, that shit just like happens sometimes,
Absolutely.
I'm going to go fill my time and hope for the best on the next one,
Yep. And what do you do to analyze, when you have a bad set? What do you try to get from it, whether you listen back or not, but what do you try to, like, even if you think back on what happened, how do you analyze it to try to prevent that from, get the takeaway so you can prevent it next time?
Not book dab lounges again.
First, I start with where I'm booking myself. And if I don't get laughs where I'm booking, I just stop booking.
I just kind of stop going there. It's clearly their fault.
I just stop going there.
It's clearly their problem.
I'm no longer going to Salt Lake City. I'm not doing comedy in Dab Line.
I don't know. I mean, in those instances, maybe you just go straight crowd work and hope for the best,
Yep.
But crowd work, again, it's one of those things that, like, I'm not an incredibly great crowd work comic in the sense of, like, I feel like I could do, like, half an hour of it, without all of like the pieces falling into place, like,
but you can definitely weave it in and out.
Yeah.
Well, which, I mean, because I've seen that with my own eyes. So
yeah, no, I appreciate that, but I just mean, like, even with that, like, all the elements, it has to kind of work out perfect.
Oh, for sure.
You know what I mean? Like, you
it
ask
can
a question,
easily go very wrong.
You ask a question, and whatever dumb thing comes to your mind works. That's all crowd work is for the most. I mean, there's at least until like there's certain comics that like that's all they do.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
and they have like canned crowd work basically. Where they kind of know a couple things that people are gonna say, or they have like you look like a certain type of person that I see a lot.
I hate that kind of crowd work when they have that canned crowd work.
Yeah, I don't know.
Just like, but there's comics that don't have canned crowd work that do just do crowd work and just crush. And that, they basically just improvise their whole set, that's amazing.
Which is pretty awesome. And I do feel like I'd like to be able to get to that point, not necessarily like all the time, but you really gotta be at a place that people are like the venue's cool with that, like you're already like in with them. Because I'm also, I'm still in a position where I'm still trying to make my way around the country and prove myself, and you know, I gotta have like a pretty long leash at a place to just go and do half an hour and feel like, you know what, tonight's the night.
Yeah. Tonight's the night I'm going to try this.
Yeah.
I'm coming here with no jokes. I'm throwing the joke book out.
Yeah.
I'm just going straight up.
But I've
I got
also
an idea.
I've also tried, you know, being cognizant of of what you're doing while you're on stage is something that I think you get better and better at, you know, as time goes on. But even still, like, you go in and out of like how aware you are of what you're thinking about and what you're doing on stage. I always try to remind myself, like, before I go up, if you're in something, stay there. You know, like if you're doing crowd work and it's going really well, don't leave it.
Oh, yeah.
Like literally try to stay there as long as you possibly can, because you're trying to capture like lightning in a bottle, and you kind of already have, you know, so as soon as you don't get like one laugh, like maybe ask like one or two more questions and then move on.
Yeah.
Like after that.
Oh, yeah. You can definitely push it too far and beat it to death. And then all the like you said, the lightning in the bottle just escapes and you lose it all.
One of the observations that I talked about on another podcast in regards to crowd work is that not even crowd work, but you know how when you know comics you'll point out somebody in the crowd and it gets a big laugh or whatever.
Kind of make an observation of somebody.
Every time you go back to it, it gets less and less.
Yeah.
Like every time, like either you do it or another comic later in the show does it, it never gets as big of a laugh as it did initially. And then if you continue to do so, it eventually just doesn't get any.
Unless you work it into a way where you like make it a callback.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like I've seen that where a comic will, you know, say something to somebody that's really funny, and then they'll go do other stuff, and then all of a sudden something happens, and then it gives them an opportunity to call back the thing earlier. That gets a really good laugh. But I think what you're kind of saying is that you just like, oh, my jokes aren't working, now I'm going back to this guy.
Yeah.
and that you're right. You can watch that slowly just kind of descend.
Kind of just
every
appreciates in
time.
value every time.
Exactly. That's a good way to describe it. Now, when you're on stage and you tell a joke, or you start to lose the crowd, you tell a joke and it doesn't work, or you feel like you're starting to lose the crowd, that you're probably going down that path to bombing. In that moment, what goes through your mind?
I usually try to, like, most of my stuff is chunks, you know, so I can pull the ripcord on something if it's not going well and then just pivot. And then ultimately you're kind of just like continuing to pivot until you find something that works. Hopefully it doesn't require too many of them, you know, but most of my stuff, the way it's structured is a handful of jokes and then a story that goes along with that topic. And the goal is obviously to be able to finish the chunk by going through the jokes and then finishing the story. So I try to just structure my set in such a way that I can like easily pivot into another subject matter. Just to kind of, when I was at license number 1 in Boulder this past weekend, we your favorite.
God, I can't even talk. Words. How many? God, I sound drunk tonight.
Yeah, it's late. Sorry, bud.
It's like words are not working for me.
But we were doing a show. The show on Saturday night. The set was going fine. The set was like it wasn't as strong as some of the other ones I'd had that weekend, but it was going okay. And then I started moving into like my drug and like my sex material, and then all of a sudden the laughs were bigger. I'm like, shit, I should have like pivoted here sooner. But I'm also trying to be averse to like just defaulting to dirty, you know, to see if that does anything, you know, because I feel like that's the easy thing for everybody to do is just like default into like dirty material to see if it starts to improve. So really just trying to get better about like, you know, being a really strong joke writer. I feel like my stories are getting really strong, and I know like they're gonna get something if like people are just along the ride for the story, or I just kind of know it's gonna get a laugh throughout and at the end. So yeah, I think just maneuvering.
Trying to maneuver out of it. Now with your talking about writing, you're talking about becoming trying to be a stronger writer. What's your writing process? Do you actually sit down and dedicate time to write, or do you just kind of flesh it out on stage? And what's the evolution for a joke for you before, you think of an idea, you're working on it, and then you either decide it's going to work or it isn't?
So I usually try to dedicate at least 15 minutes a day to writing because I can hammer out like 3 to 4 pages in a notebook in 15 minutes. And then some days it's longer, and then other days it's 15. But as long as I'm at least doing 15, it's still writing jokes. Typically try to work on stuff that, like we were just talking about earlier, like whatever I'm thinking about kind of at the time. I'm really trying to think back these days on like stories that are kind of ridiculous because I've always kind of leaned on being more of a storyteller and want to just I want to continue.
We're very similar on that, I think.
Yeah.
I'm the same. It's funny that you're talking about this because on the way up here, I was listening to an audio book about better storytelling. It was it was like an audio book from takeaways from TED Talks and using storytelling.
Yeah. It's
So
really hard, man. It's really hard. Stories are super hard. That's
absolutely.
It's usually how everybody gets into comedy is because they're really good at telling stories in front of their friends, right? And that's usually what nobody's really great at one-liners in front of their family.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like that's
nobody's at the kitchen table. Hey, you know what, Dad? Did you hear about that? Blah blah blah.
Yeah. I mean, some people can be really good roasters with their family. You know what I mean? But you're usually, you're
not just going up there and doing a setup punch.
No, not usually, right? So for me, I usually try to, kind of talk out the story in its detail, figure out what the funny parts are about it by, I'll typically try it at a show or I'll try it at a mic, and I'll just tell the story and then highlight the stuff that's funny about it and then cut the stuff that isn't. Or I try to think about the nouns or the verbs that are in the story, and can I make jokes about those so that I can just pepper jokes in throughout the entire thing, and then just start eliminating stuff from there, really. So just the writing process is me just writing as many jokes as possible, testing them out, getting rid of the stuff that doesn't, and condensing. I always try to make it as big as possible. And then make it as small as possible, and then incrementally grow it from there.
Now, with you trying to, from this point, trying to grow it, what do you, like, for you, what's the longest story that you would like to, like, for one whole bit?
The longest story I have is 5 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you thought about trying to go longer with the story? Maybe not that one, but just something you're working towards?
I kind of got inspired a little bit recently to expand on the story because I run a true crime storytelling show called Interrogation True Crime Stories.
Also a podcast.
Also a podcast that you can see old damn boy on as a guest sometime soon.
Sometime in the future.
Maybe not before Snow Jam, but sometime.
That's all right.
I know. We know.
This might not even come out before Snow Jam.
Might not come out ever. Not even convinced this is an actual podcast. This guy just showed up with merch and he's
we're just hanging out. This is
kind of a sad attempt at being friends.
Yeah, this is what comics do. Yeah, this is how comics become friends. This is what they do to be friends.
They start a podcast.
We don't know how to talk to each other without microphones, so we just put a mic in our hand so we can have a conversation.
I mean, I bought it, hook, line, and sinker. I didn't have anything else going on today. I'm like, sure, Dan, come down. Have a water.
Let's hang out.
You owe me $1 for that. Okay.
Oh, shit. I don't have any cash. Do you accept credit?
So I run this storytelling show, and it has been a really great opportunity for me to try stories without the fear of failing, because the show isn't about the story really being funny. The show is about like people committing crimes or witnessing crimes, telling the story. People are just compelled by the crime itself, and then we do stuff after the story to make it funny, so that we know that part's going to be funny. The story doesn't have to be funny. So it's given me the opportunity to like tell stories, and this one in particular, I have used it for my closer for a couple of years, and it's about smoking weed, getting caught smoking weed when I was in high school, and part of the show is that people ask you questions about the story afterwards.
Oh, wow.
So that's
an interesting element.
So that's why it's called interrogation. So people can, like the hosts, myself and a co-host, and the audience ask questions to the comic like afterwards. And then we riff and goof on them and like whatever. Somebody had asked, did you ever smoke weed with your dad? Because the story is about getting caught by my parents. My dad was high when we got caught, like whatever. And I was like, oh, yeah. And I told the story of like smoking weed with my dad, and that got like a pretty big laugh. And I was like, oh, maybe I can like add that on to like a later in life kind of thing.
Yep.
And make that a little bit longer.
Yeah, you could even make that. Well, I guess if you're closing with it, you couldn't. But I was going to say you could almost make that the smoking weed with your dad a callback to it if it was like at the beginning of your,
Yeah, and I
depending
could
on the placement. Or
yeah,
whatever,
but I mean, maybe that could move.
yeah.
It can move things around. Like
Yeah.
I'm not beholden to this being my closer or that being my closer
Yeah.
or my opener or whatever. It's just yeah. So that's kind of like how I've tried to go about doing it.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit earlier about kind of some goals and stuff. What you're trying to work towards. What kind of goals have you set for yourself, both short term, long term, and what do you try to do to achieve those goals?
Well, I wanted to make all of my goals just for this year things that I can control. In terms
Smart.
of yeah. Well, I started breaking it down. And I know we talked a bit before about I have the time to go on the road and headline and at least headline like smaller shows or whatever, right? So at some point I realized I don't need to come up with new material. Like I'm coming up with new material for me and my ego, but if I'm going to Arkansas, those people haven't heard any of my jokes before. Like everything's new to them, and I thought about how, one thing I can control is like how many cities I go to this year. So it was like, I want to go to 10 to 12 different cities this year. I've got this storytelling show. I want to do it 12 times this year, 6 of which are in other cities. I want to grow my brand either by building a following when I go to these cities or building it online. So I'm putting out content online like every day. Really like doing my podcast that's in conjunction with the storytelling show. I can put out an episode a week.
Yeah, and that's smart having that like tied in with your live show too. Do you release when you do the live shows, do you record the audio and release that as the podcast too?
No, we don't do that. What we do, I do record a videotape. I record video. I don't know how you say it these days because you're like, there's no tape. There's no tape anymore.
Well, yeah,
So I use that and I make clips out of those. What I think I would like to do is increase the production value on the live show with audio and video equipment. And my ultimate goal with those is to kind of start releasing it like a web series, kind of like This Is Not Happening.
Yep.
And
I was going to suggest you could even do that as like Patreon, like bonus content.
Yeah, exactly.
If you will.
That's what I think the plan is. What I want to do before that happens is just increase the production value, so it's worth people's money or worth people's like eyeballs, And also like I want it to be something that the comics are like okay with putting out there, and I think it'll be easier for them to do so if it looks and sounds great. The show has a following, and that's definitely, it's in the works. Because the way the show works is we have a comic tell a story. They take up like 10 minutes doing a story, and then we have them sit down, and my co-host and I in the audience ask them questions, and we goof and riff about those. And then we have my phone number up on like a TV screen so that the audience can text in their own crimes like during the show for us to read out loud. And then all of us have microphones, so we're all just riffing and talking and goofing about it. And then that's one comic set, which takes about like 15 to 20 minutes. Yep. So each comic set would be an episode.
Oh, yeah. Yep, that makes sense. And how many when you do the live show, how many comics are on that?
3.
3 at a time?
Yeah.
No, I think that's a great concept. And then when you're going out trying to get to these different cities, because you said your goal is to go to more cities, try to headline more shows, bring your show on the road more. Do you try to like pair that up? Do you send it as like a package deal? So like say you're going to Dry Heat, you're going, hey, so I want to do stand-up, but I also have this fun storytelling show where we could bring some of the locals on it and do this.
Yeah.
Is that how you're trying to...
Yeah, that's basically how I've done it, and it's been very successful. Like strangely enough, the show has done better on the road than it does in Denver.
Really?
I have no idea
That's
why.
interesting.
I have no idea why. We've done it 3 times on the road, and we've been at least 60% sold at all 3 shows. One was a sellout, and here I struggle to get like 15 people.
How many
out there.
shows have you done here, though?
We've only done like 3 or 4 here,
Yeah,
maybe,
okay.
and they're
I
all
was just going to
spread.
say, well, the reason I was going to say is because it's like, well, when you do the same show, even if it's a monthly show with different comics in the same area, you know, people kind of just get used to it. But when it's like a one-time deal,
Yeah.
there's more. It has more of I can't think of a word.
Like a
right
lure?
now. Yeah, an allure to it. People are like, oh, this sounds really interesting.
I'm
It's not, you know, it's not something that happens on a regular basis. So,
I have no idea, but it has been very helpful with booking tours because, you know, comedy clubs and other venues are always looking for stuff to do on off nights. You know,
Oh,
Wednesdays,
absolutely.
Thursdays, Sundays. You know, if I can come in and say, hey, I've got a show, like you said, we'll book local comics and we can do it on a night where you might not have anything scheduled, and then I can work that weekend. It's been awesome, and I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes. And I'm excited to have another creative outlet that's kind of like stand up but different. You know,
Yep.
like flexing that creative, quick twitch muscle, like while you're on stage, and improving storytelling. In addition to like, because I love doing stand up, but it has been like really fun to do something else that's a live performance, and it's
absolutely.
and it's my thing, and I'm like, and people are stoked about it, and it's like, okay, this seems pretty rad too. Because I also figured out, like, you know, there's so many stand-up comics in the country. There's a lot of really good ones, and how do you stand out? Like, what can you do to make a name for yourself? And having your own show that's unique is one way to do that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, packaging yourself as, you know, basically into a brand and a whole package deal. And like, you're not just getting me, Korey, as a comic. You're getting me and my show and this and that. And you're adding more value to what you have to offer. And there's nothing that can never be bad, adding more value, because that's exactly what venues want.
Yeah, I remember we did the first one on the road down in Houston at the Secret Group. And I was nervous, like, going into it because I'm like, shit, I've never done this on the road before. Is anybody going to come? And I was blown away by, like, the number of people that came, the audience that was there. It was so much fun. And I was like, damn, okay, like, I can do this. Because I'd tried doing a concept show before. We did it once and never did it again. It was...
Speaking of the art of bombing.
Oh, yeah. Here's the thing. The show actually went pretty damn well, but I almost killed somebody.
Oh,
like, it
Jesus.
was... So, do you know Ian Aber down in Atlanta?
I don't. The name doesn't sound familiar.
Okay, Ian's great. He's so funny, and he's really great. He's just a great comic, great person. We were doing. I was talking to my friend Colton Dowling, he's one of the owners of the Creek and the Cave down in Austin. We were just shooting the shit, and I told him about this like idea that I had for a show called House Party. And the idea behind it was we'd have 2 teams of comedians, like 3 and 3, and we would play a series of like college style like drinking games in conjunction with doing like improv and stand up. And he was like, I love that. We're looking for something to do like Halloween Sunday if you want to come down and do it. I was like, okay. And I'd never done it before, right? So we did like a test one at Bandit Oak Brewing in Denver, where I run like a monthly show, and did it with some local comics, and it went fine. You know, the whole purpose was like, give me notes, what works, what doesn't work, whatever. And we do it down in Austin, and we had like 40 people there on like a 6 o'clock show on a Sunday. And I was like, okay, that's pretty rad, you know? And one of the games was Dizzy Bat.
Oh, jeez.
Have you ever played Dizzy Bat?
Oh man, I've never played it, but I know what
You get
is.
it, right?
Yeah,
You
get
know what it is.
You don't even have to know what it is to get what it is.
All right, so for anybody
It says
that
everything.
doesn't know, the way the drinking game is supposed to work is you chug a beer, and then you put your forehead down on a baseball bat, and you put the baseball bat like on the ground, and then you spin around it 10 times and basically try not to fall over.
Yeah.
Is the game. We're idiots. Humans are idiots.
Oh, absolutely.
We're very dumb creatures. And so I was like, okay, we'll do a modified version of this where you do like a shot of beer, you do Dizzy Bat, you spin around the bat, and then you do 3 minutes of stand-up. And Ian is a lovely man, but he is a he's a decent sized man, he doesn't work out a ton or whatever. And he did it, and he had this like kind of glazed look in his eye, and then just fell backwards. And me and another comic, if we weren't behind him, he would have fallen like right off the stage.
Oh no!
Yeah. So the show went fine. Ultimately,
but definitely people could get hurt.
Oh yeah. Somebody was like, "You should."
Some lawsuits coming.
And I just realized like there's way too many moving parts. There was way too many moving parts to it that I was just like, I don't want to do this as a regular show. It's too much, you know. I think in theory it was fun. Like Brett Hiker does a really cool show called Power Hour that's kind of similar, but I think he's got it down like pretty good. And a lot of the games don't necessarily involve him as much. It's the two comics that are competing against each other. But I just realized that wasn't for me.
Well, this has been fun. We got to wrap up. We talked about bombing. I like to go out more positive. What was so far in your career? What's been one of your favorite gigs that you've done so far?
Well, I was down in Houston earlier this year, and I got to work with Mark Normand, and it was one of like the cool. Like, I love Mark. He's a great hang, very funny comic, and he just has such a great following now that we did 6 shows down at the Houston Improv, which is like a 600-person room, and every single one was sold out. And it was just like, just a really cool experience. So, like, because when they're your fans, they're just on board for like whatever he wants to say, and they also are like very excited to be there, you know. So like every crowd was just fucking dynamite.
Were you featuring or just doing like a spot?
I was hosting. And
you were
my
hosting.
buddy Andrew
Okay,
Youngblood was featuring because he opens for him quite a bit. And then he was like, well, I was planning on coming down there anyway. And he was like, well, if you want, I'll talk to Mark and we'll probably just have you host. And so it worked out to be a really
that's
fun
amazing.
weekend.
That's fantastic.
And then honestly, when I was I did my two longest sets on the road this past year. One was at down in Savannah, which is this really cool, like notorious bar down there called Wormhole that I was super intimidated, like going into it. Like I hadn't done 45 on the road before, and I'm looking at the lineup of people that were like just there and the people that are coming after me, and I'm like, I'm a fraud. Like I can't.
Like, how did I get here?
Yeah, I'm like, I don't deserve
Did
to
they
be
look
here.
at my credentials?
And we walk in, and it's a bar, and I'm like, oh fuck, like and there weren't a lot of people there, and I'm just like, this is gonna suck. Like, what am I doing? And filled out. They had it closed just for the show, and it went awesome. Like, literally couldn't have asked for it to go a whole lot better. So that was a really like cool, proud moment. And then similar situation. I was just up in Bend, Oregon. My friend Katie Ipock runs really great shows up there, and it was my first time doing an hour. And again, same deal. Like, couldn't believe like how great it went. Like, I'm not saying that like I'm capable of doing an hour on repeat like everywhere I go in the country, but like I did that one, and it just felt really rewarding and felt like really fun. And I was just like really proud of myself for doing that. And it was like great, sold out room. Same thing with Wormholes, like sold out. I'm just like, that's dope. Like, this is what I want to do.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's always such a good feeling. It's always such a good feeling just to be able to do that hour the first time, just accomplishing it, just whether it goes well or not, knowing that you were able to do an hour in a row. It's amazing.
Yeah, and since I've done that, people
but
have
even
asked
better when they enjoy it.
Yeah, they're like, how much crowd work did you do? I'm like, honestly, not a lot, you know. Granted, I had probably 10 to 15 minutes in the tank to spare, you know, so it's not like I had a lot of wiggle room, but yeah, it was just I was really happy that it happened, and look forward to having that opportunity again down the road.
That's fantastic. Well, the final thing, we have the Art of Bombing Get Pumped playlist. Doesn't have to be a song that gets you pumped for comedy, but just something that gets you pumped for any activity. What's a song that you'd like to add to the playlist?
Doja Cat, Go to Town.
Go to Town. All right, we got it.
Hell
I'm going
yeah.
to put it on here in a minute. Well, where can people find you? Direct them to where you'd like them to follow you online and promote yourself.
So I'm on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok as fake Korey David. That's Korey, Korey David. You can go on my website for all my tour dates. That's koreydavid.com. And on the YouTube page, that's where you can find like clips from stand up on all platforms. But if you want to find the Interrogation True Crime Stories podcast, that's on YouTube, Spotify, Google, and iTunes. So give those a like, follow. And like I said, if you do go on my website, check out the tour schedule and come out to a show.
All right. Thanks so much for doing the podcast. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
It's the art of bombing.
That was our conversation with Korey David.
Korey
David, fantastic comedian, fantastic at crowd work. I've told him that. I've mentioned it in the podcast when we were chatting because he is great at crowd work. And that's something I'm not great at. But there was a lot of great insight there.
Absolutely. You can just tell with his banter with you on the podcast. He, just was able to riff on a lot of things. I don't doubt that at all. Really smart guy. I appreciated a lot of things he had to say, particularly about the conversation you guys got onto about sort of economy that exists between the comedian and the venue, right?
Venue, booker, producer, whatever.
Yeah.
I know sometimes there's a third party.
But a lot of us, are not working in comedy clubs, but when we are, we're trying to patch the holes between shows with these alt room bar gigs, and we're booking with people who want a comic to come in and create something to happen, some kind of event at their space.
Yeah, and I mean, we did, just to interject real quick, because we did a 3-part series on producing your own show, and we probably touched a little bit on that, but when you're working independently, even if you're not producing like a full-on show with other comedians, if you're working independently, it's kind of the same concept as you are producing your own show, but it's your show, so there is no middle person.
Right. That's right. So it's you in the venue. And, we've talked about this before. I feel like comics are doing themselves and other comics a disservice by always trying to take the lowest price. Like, think about it in sort of the economy of what you're doing, right? If you charge $600 to a bar for performing your set, providing 60 to 90 minutes of entertainment, and that's your rate, you're not going to get a lot of deals where they wanted $150, $300, right? But if you book one of them, that's the same as booking 12 $50 gigs.
Yep. And I agree. I think quality should always be, above quantity, because you can easily go get a bunch of gigs for $25, but it, $50, whatever it is, but you're not going to get that quality out of it either, Yeah. And when you're creating a standard and a precedent, so when you go and book a show like that, you're setting a standard, especially if it's a new venue that hasn't done any comedy before, because now they think all comedy costs X amount of dollars.
And that's the thing. They haven't done it before. You're the expert.
That's right.
So if you're walking into a place and you're trying to say, look, the microphone can go over here, the chairs need to face this way, that means somebody's never booked a comic before. And you're assuming that they're going to find something else just as good if they don't work with you. And that's not necessarily the case. Without you, they don't have anybody there that night. So be the expert and say, look, you've never purchased this before, but this is about what it costs. For me to do this, it's going to come with these things.
Yep. You gotta sell yourself. You gotta sell what your product, which is you and your show and your expertise. I mean, that's really what a lot of comedy is, especially when people, you said that a bit and people are like, well, that's expensive. Well, you're paying for that expertise. It's not just, they're not paying you for your show. They're paying, that's part of it, but they're also paying for your years of experience, the years that you went to open mics and did crappy shows and got to where you are as a comedian to be able to go and destroy a room. They're paying for that as well. There's that. They're paying for your as Josh said, your expertise on setting up a room. And in my experience, I've found that when a venue is working with a comedian who really knows their stuff, and helps them put on a really great show. And then they decide, well, we could do this cheaper if we do it on our own. And they go out on their own, they fail miserably because they can't. They think they can because they think they can just replicate what that comedian did, or producer, but they can't. And then usually the comedy fizzles out, and then they don't do comedy anymore. So
That's right.
Just, and that's just been my experience. So you are, you got to make sure you're getting your worth, and they're letting them know they're paying for that, your expertise, your experience. They're paying for all the things.
That's right. Well said. Yeah, I think that was a great topic and a great episode.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think we should probably wrap things up real quick. Again, we talked about earlier that we had the 3-part series that we did, the how to produce your own comedy show. We do have the audio is behind a paywall because we transferred the Between the Bombs to the subscription service, but there's some good news. We also did video of that, and because we're awesome, all 3 parts are now up on our YouTube. They're available on our YouTube channel in video format, so you're getting it's better than the audio because you're getting to see the presentation that Josh put together. He put a lot of work into that. There's slides. We talk about all kinds of information. So all of that is on our YouTube page, all 3 parts. So start with part 1, go to part 2, go to part 3. Or you can watch them out of order, too. It doesn't really matter because they each have their own kind of topic. But, watching them in order.
They stand alone.
They can stand alone, but watching them in order probably makes more sense because we took producing a show and broke it up into 3 sections. Finding your venue, building your lineup, and then marketing and promoting it. So go check that out. And otherwise, you can follow me at Debub Comedy. Where can they follow you, Josh?
JoshShirleyComedy.com. All my social will be hinged off that. You can find me Facebook, Josh Shirley Comedy there.
Perfect. All right, guys. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll be back next week.
It's the art of bombing.